Hello again, beautiful beings of light. Welcome back. I have been promising and talking about this video for quite some time. I'm finally doing it, and I am pre-recording it so that I can edit it and overlay the pictures of my tattoos onto this video. So you will see that coming up on the screen just in a little bit. Before I really get into all of my tattoos and the understanding of me from Akashic Records and past lifetimes on this planet, I want to just explain a couple of things that were told to me when I was very young about tattoos, and I was told all this information from my spirit guides. So it was actually when I was 16 when I got my first tattoo, where I was told that tattoos on the body, ink on the body, also work with energy, and how important it is to make sure that my tattoos are always in flow with my vibration. So one of the things that they told me was all of my tattoos need to be symmetrical. So they basically said that there always has to be a balance with my tattoos on my body. It always has to be symmetrical. So you will notice in the tattoos that I explain that most of them, well, all of them really, are either right in the middle of my body, or I have one side and then another side. And when I first got I think the first couple of tattoos were right in the middle. And then I also had a download later on, probably around the age of 18, 19 years old, that every tattoo also has to be a representation of a binary in this reality. So if you have one side, you have another side. So all of the tattoos you will notice on either side of my body are always going to be binary or polarity tattoos. And I'll get into all of that just in a little bit. It's going to be pretty cool. What else did I say here? I had to write a couple notes because surprisingly I have a lot of tattoos without it looking like I have a lot of tattoos. Yes, also, I was so funny, at a certain point in time, I typically get a new tattoo maybe once a year. It's not very common. And I only get a new tattoo based on a download. All my tattoos are based on universal truths and downloads. And all of these tattoos are based on downloads, typically in relation to past lifetimes. So it almost feels like my physical body in this lifetime is a scripture of all of my past lives, but also at the same time, it's also an outline of universal truth, which is really cool. And we're going to get into that today. So I remember at 18, my mom said, she would check me. She's like, "Do you have a new tattoo? Let me know." She thought I was just, going to be all tatted up. And she's like, "This is going to be the last one, right? You promise it's the last one?" And I had this flash forward of me on stage explaining all of my tattoos, and I was like pretty tatted up. Now, when I was 18, I maybe had 2 of them, so I have a lot more than I had even back then, but I basically told my mom, I said, "Nope, it's not going to stop. I mean, this is going to continue." So that was really funny. And then the other thing that I want to explain before I dive in, when I started getting the tattoos at 16, everyone always told me, "Well, you know that they're permanent, right? You know that these tattoos are permanent." And that saying never really resonated with me. And I wasn't sure why the whole saying of tattoos are permanent. And then I made a realization back then, which was tattoos are permanent, but this body is impermanent. And the messages of the tattoos that I'm putting on this impermanent body are permanent. They're universal truths. They will never change. This body will decay and go away at a certain point in time on this planet, and yet the information contained within the tattoos will exist indefinitely throughout all of the universe. So it's funny, I actually believe the exact opposite of tattoos, but my tattoos in particular is, I believe that the tattoos and the body itself is impermanent. I believe the messages and the information contained within the tattoos is permanent. So I have a bit of a skewed perception. Obviously, it's my own perception, but that came to me as well. So my first tattoo, I was 16 years old. I had to forge my parents' signature on the tattoo I guess, paperwork, because anyone who's under 18 basically had to get their parents' permission to get a tattoo. So I went in with my brother and, I had the signed paperwork and I put my first tattoo somewhere that no one could really see. So you won't see this tattoo in the majority of my photos and those kind of things. You really won't see this one. And so it is in Italian. I got the tattoo because I made that realization, that download. I wouldn't have called it a download at 16. Now I'm calling it a download. But I had that realization and that download at 16 when I did a foreign exchange in high school in this lifetime, and I went to Italy. So I went to Italy for about, I think, 4 or 5 months, maybe even less than that. And I lived there. I went to high school there. I stayed with an Italian family there. It was amazing. One of the best opportunities my parents could have ever given me, especially as a little rebel child that I was. And I learned this lesson. And you will notice that the tattoo that I have, and I'll put it on screen now, is literally in Italian. And the way that you say it is tutto succede per una ragione, which means everything happens for a reason. And so I learned that lesson in Italy. And actually, when I went to Italy, I ended up falling in love with an Italian boy, eye roll. And then when I had to go back to Canada, I had to leave this Italian boy and my Italian life behind, which really represented freedom. And then later on in life, I ended up tapping into the energy of that. And I got thrown back into a past lifetime where I was a female. I don't know what timeline it was. It's actually quite difficult to understand timelines in Europe in particular, because after a certain point in time, all the buildings kind of stayed the same. You know what I mean? Like, I pretty much have a good guess on the timeline, but there isn't like a date that pops up in my mind when I take a look at past lifetimes. It's like, okay, I'm looking at the outfits, I'm looking at the buildings, and this is what I assume. I would say, yeah, back in that time, it was probably around 1400s, like Renaissance era of Italy. So lots of expression, lots of creativity, lots of pushing the traditional boundaries, and even pushing religious boundaries as well back in that time. But I was a woman. I grew up in a small village, a small town, small village, and I was always looking to get out. I was always looking to escape. I always wanted something more. And I started a relationship with someone, a man in that life, who my parents didn't approve of. And I always had major issues with my father in that past lifetime. And then eventually I said, eventually they kicked me out, right? And I was probably around the age of 16 when they kicked me out, maybe even younger, 15 years old when they kicked me out. And so they kicked me out and I left. And I thought it was the worst thing ever. Like, all of my friends, my family, my support system, the roof over my head, the food in the cupboards, I don't know, was all gone, right? It was just gone. It was taken from me. And then I went to the big city. I just moved there. Immediately, once again, eye roll, fell in love with this man. And he was like a Renaissance man, it was a full-on city boy, and very creative. He was a poet and an artist and a painter and a singer, and he just did all of it, right? All of the expression. And so fell in love right away. We would travel around. We would almost like playing on the street corner. We would do certain things for money, like here and there, odd jobs. And I learned the lesson in that past lifetime that even though I came from a huge trauma, even though I got kicked out, it all worked out in the end. It all happened for a reason. And since re-experiencing that past lifetime when I went to Italy, and re-experiencing the connection that I had with that Italian boy when I was in Italy, I experienced the lesson and the understanding that everything happens for a reason. And ever since then, ever since 16, I have 100% always lived my life with this fundamental universal truth that everything happens for a reason. Therefore, no matter it be a job loss or leaving a fiance or, moving to a different country, right? No matter what your decision is, It's all happening for a reason, but good, bad, and ugly. So there's, ever since then, ever since 16, there's never been any regret in my life. And I do the same thing with art. So I'll paint a painting and there's a mistake, right? And I was getting interviewed on my art, like, I used to do galleries and showings, and I was heavily involved in the art community. And so one time I got interviewed on my artwork, and they asked me, they said, well, what do you do when you make a mistake on your canvas? And I said, I don't believe in mistakes. I believe that if a paint splatter, got onto the canvas, I'm not going to correct it. I believe that it happened for a reason. And that's how I work with my art. That's also how I live my life. So yeah. So anyway, so that's the first tattoo. Tutto succede per una ragione. Yeah. All right. Let's move on. So I tried to do these in chronological order. I can't tell you all of the ages that I got. I can kind of guess the ages that I got these, but that's completely irrelevant because, once again, it's not necessarily the timeline in this lifetime that matters. But I think that the next tattoo I got is the one that I have directly in the middle of my back, and it's 3 words. And I believe that this is around 18, 19 years old when I started to open everything up, like astral travel, lucid dreaming, talking to interdimensionals. I mean, it was a huge reawakening for me in 2010, understanding that aliens exist, going to Vipassana, like tons and tons of things. And so I think I was studying for an exam because I remember just being at my desk and this huge download came to me, and it was 3 words. And as you can see from the photo, the words are in English, but the script looks like Sanskrit. So the script looks very kind of Eastern, Indian almost in that way. And I did that for a reason, because I took this download from a past lifetime that was in India. And I was a yogi who was existing. I was a male, a yogi who was existing in Burma. Now, when you think about yogi today, you think about this guy doing yoga, and it was definitely not that. Like, think about, airbender, levitating, being able to, chop a stone in half, like what I did as that yogi. I was also a breatharian in that lifetime as well. What I did as that yogi defied the laws of physics, right? And I really learned a lot from that past lifetime. Anyway, and so, so what I learned is that there are 3 things that encompass the existence of being human. And the 3 words are ignorance, ego, and time. These are all levels. They're all stages for us to overcome in order to basically move into ascension or enlightenment. So let's just talk about this really briefly. So the first word is ignorance. You don't know what you don't know. And you need to free yourself of ignorance in this reality, in this dimension, in order to be able to move on to your own ego and to time itself. So ignorance is huge. And I think a lot of you, if not all of you, have already overcome this stage of understanding that there's an infinite amount of information out there, and then also understanding that it's not realistic for you to have all of that infinite amount of information out there. Right? So being aware of that. So ignorance, understanding your own ignorance and freeing yourself from the ignorance within this reality. And then the second word is ego. Obviously, that's just you're human. It's not the traditional sense of ego and having a big ego. It's nothing to do with that. It means you're human as a whole. It means your programming. It means your mind. Overcoming your own mind. Understanding that your ego, your limited perspective as a human being, is not the only perspective that you can have when understanding this reality. And then the third, and probably the most powerful thing that we can overcome to really overcome any and all limitations on this planetary plane, is time itself. And when I was that yogi in Burma, I would meditate and close my eyes, and I could bend time. an hour could go by or 3 days could go by. Time did not exist for me in that incarnation. I believe that I understand the concept of time and what it means to overcome time. Do I believe that I've fully been there to overcome time? No. Do I believe that I've fully overcome my ego? No, absolutely not. I'm still working on that. But I know and I'm hoping that this lifetime is the lifetime when I can really understand all three of those concepts and therefore overcome and override all three of those concepts. Okay, so the next tattoo that I got, and I believe it was either in the same year that I got Ignorance, Ego, Time, or potentially just the year after. So it would have, once again, been around probably 19 years old, 18, 19 years old when I got this. And it's the equation on my shoulder. And it's funny because I got one shoulder done 1 year, and then I waited a whole year to get the other shoulder done because I didn't think that it had a binary, right? And the equation, it's so cool. I love it. Obviously, it's like right here, but so this equation is in, and this came to me so clearly, this is in Greek mathematical symbols. So if you deal with, I don't know, what mathematics, I think, deals with pi and stuff like that. So anyway, so this is coming from a past lifetime where I was in ancient Greece, and I was, what did they call me, a seer? Yeah, they called me a seer or a mystic. I don't know if you can hear my dog snoring in the background, but for whatever reason, it's kind of awesome. Every time I do a video, she passes right out. I feel like she can feel the vibration. Well, hopefully it doesn't put you guys to sleep, but anyway. So I was a seer or a mystic in ancient Greece. And from a very young age, I had that ability. And so my parents, I don't want to say they sold me to the system, but I was basically kind of enslaved, giving readings to the people who ran society back then. And any time I gave them a reading that they didn't like, anytime I gave them a reading that they didn't like, they would whip me. They would put my arms up and like rope them, and then they would whip my back. And they would do this in public. And it was kind of like an example, making an example of me, saying, this is someone who didn't get it right, and yet they still used me and my services and my abilities. And so I was very caught up in between giving the truth, the right information, or giving them something that they wanted to hear. And I think I really learned that I was stuck between a rock and a hard place in that lifetime. And that neither one of those options, well, I mean, obviously giving them the truth was the right option, but I wasn't free to do so. And I could have left and I could have run away at any time, and I chose not to. I chose to stay there, right, to my own detriment. And so I learned a huge lesson in that lifetime. And I learned the difference between reality and truth. So the first equation that I put right here on my shoulder is knowledge squared. And the reason why I decided to square the knowledge is because I'm talking about all knowledge of the physical world plus all knowledge of the non-physical world. And then you add perception to the knowledge, all the knowledge, and it equals reality. So all knowledge plus perception equals reality. So, for example, a table in its atomic state is just a table in that physical position. That is, the knowledge of the table is in its atomic state. You add your perception to the table. I made that table with my bare hands, or I tripped over that table and now I hate that table. You add your perception to just the basis fundamental truth of this reality, and it equals your individual reality. I know I just used reality twice, but hopefully that makes sense. All knowledge plus our perception, our ego, onto that knowledge equals our reality. Then on the other shoulder, about a year later, I got the opposite, the binary of this equation, which is, and as you can see, I have the little therefore, right? The 3 dots is the therefore sign within mathematics. And the therefore sign represents all knowledge plus perception equals reality. Therefore, knowledge minus perception equals truth. Therefore, knowledge plus perception equals reality. And it's just this infinite loop of information. So obviously the opposite is knowledge, all knowledge, knowledge squared. This time you minus. You take out the perception, you take out the ego, you take out the attachments and the judgment and the projection, and it equals truth. The table in its atomic form is the physical truth of that table. So I believe that the biggest misconception within humanity is that people believe that their reality is the truth, and it's not. And I remember I was on a bus going to and from my university at the time. I just got this tattoo, the reality one. And I had this really amazing older Indian man, come up to me, and he's like, oh, so that's a really cool, is that Greek? That's a really cool tattoo on your shoulder. And I said, oh, thank you. I just got it, actually. And he's like, oh, wow. So are you into math? And I said, well, I'm into universal truth in physics. And this is when I was getting huge downloads about quantum physics and oscillation and vibrational frequency, and it was amazing. And he said, would you like to have a coffee sometime? And I'm like, yeah, for sure. I mean, I would literally want to talk to anyone who was into what I was into. So I felt like it was pretty divine that I attracted this man. And so we went out for coffee, and turns out he was the quantum physics professor at my university, McMaster University. And, what turned into, what was going to be, a 20-minute coffee turned into like 4 hours of talking about physics and quantum physics and what I know. And him literally just jaw dropped saying, and you're sure you've never read a book on physics? You're sure you've never, been taught quantum physics? And I said, no, I'm telling you, I get all my information from aliens. And it just must have blown his mind. I really wish that I still had his number, contact or whatever. But anyway, so those are the equations on my shoulders, coming from the Greek lifetime. What's next? Oh yeah. Okay, so then, when I was 18, I went away to a 10-day meditation retreat called Vipassana. It's a silent meditation retreat that ended up getting started in India, and then it just kind of spread its way all over the world, which is really impressive, really. And in around the same time, so probably 19, 20 years old. So I went to Vipassana when I was 18. And then when I was 19, 20, I got these tattoos. The first tattoo that I got is actually a Sanskrit word that's embedded within the teachings of Buddhism. And it's on my wrist, but I'll put up the picture anyway. And it's pronounced dukkha or dukkha. It really depends. And it's spelled Dukkaha. And it really, dukkha is all about how the mind will put you into suffering. And there's different stages of suffering. And I really learned all of that suffering that my mind was putting me in this Indian lifetime that I had when I was actually practicing and studying Buddhism. So when that concept came back to me in this lifetime, I decided to put it on my wrist. And the reason why I put it on my wrist is because out of all of the other tattoos that I have, this is the one that I can actually see the most. And so anytime I would project this suffering or wallow in my own misery or be sad about a breakup or whatever it was in this lifetime, I could always look down at my wrist and remember that it's not my boyfriend, it's not my boss, it's not my teacher or professor, it's me. I'm the only one putting myself into suffering, right? And so then it was about 2 or 3 years later, and you can probably tell the difference in the quality of the tattoo, because obviously it fades over time, that the other tattoo that I got on my other wrist, for a very long time I was questioning it, and then it just came to me the one day, and it's the word equanimity. Now, of course, that is I believe, an English word, but I also put it into very kind of Sanskrit looking text. And so equanimity is what I learned and practiced in Vipassana, which is the state of being where you can be aware of everything with non-reaction, right? To be equanimous in your day-to-day is objective awareness with no reaction. So being in an equanimous state is really also surpassing the concepts of things like pain, right? And so of course, one wrist says dukkha, which is your mind putting you into suffering. Equanimity is the solution of the suffering in your own mind. Be objectively aware of the suffering and then liberate that suffering by just sitting in it. That's it. And that really leads me to the next tattoo that I have, which is the back of my neck. And I'm sure most of you haven't seen it because I'm rarely facing away from the camera. But the tattoo is prana. And there's different ways to spell it, but this is the one that I most resonated with. Once again, this is coming from a Buddhist yogi lifetime. I spent a lot of lifetimes in India on this planet, and a lot of lifetimes studying Buddhism and different deep meditation practices. And so prana, from my understanding, even though there's different ways to define it as well out there, my understanding, prana is wisdom. And it's really interesting. Out of all my tattoos, this is the one that impacted me immediately after I got it. And basically after I got it, it opened up a portal in my throat chakra because it's right in the back of my throat chakra. And so I put it specifically on the back of my neck to remind me that I am only meant to speak prana in this lifetime. I'm only meant to speak pure wisdom in this lifetime. Doesn't take away from my human, because my human is not pure prana. I'll tell you that right now. But in my teachings, I always want to bring it back to prana. I always want to bring it back to wisdom. And from my understanding of prana is that pure wisdom or true wisdom is being able to ask the right questions to receive the appropriate answers. So it's actually about asking the right questions, or how you're asking the questions in order to receive the best answer, right? I think another definition of prana is life force energy too, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. There's tons of information about prana, but this is one word that came to me. I don't even know how I came across this word, but I just know that this is directly connected to those Buddhism lifetimes of wisdom and accessing that and opening that portal. Once again, after I tattooed that, it was 19, 20 years old. Maybe around 20 when I got that tattooed. And it was really awesome because I had a friend in university who was a tattoo artist, and his name was Rudy. Like, he's a big guy. And he ended up tattooing prana on the back of my neck in my apartment in university. And I was so relaxed because I was really working on the concept of pain and the fact that pain was just an illusion based on a reaction in your own mind. So funny. I was laying down, we set up a bunch of chairs. I was laying down, face down, and he was doing this tattoo on my neck. And he told me, he's like, the neck tends to really hurt. It's not an area that you interact with often. And so I was so relaxed, focusing on my breath and being objectively aware of the sensation, that I ended up falling asleep, completely passing out during the tattoo. And then all of a sudden I wake up and he's like, Liz, hello, are you okay? And I'm like, what? Yeah, I was just, sorry, I must have dozed off. And he's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty relaxed, And so that was pretty cool. And then the craziest thing is that afterwards, after that tattoo was done, and he left it open. He didn't cover it for whatever reason. I don't know. Some tattoo artists are different. And so I went like this to the back of my neck, and I you just kind of rub the back of your neck, and you're like, oh my God, I just touched an open wound with a dirty hand. Like, what did I just do? And I'm like, man, that's weird. Like, why would I do that? 5 minutes later, I do the same thing once again, touching the back of my head. I'm like, what? How did I do that again? And then I had this huge download and realization that memory, and I call it 3D memory, and that's when I had a huge download about what memory is, and oh my goodness, that deserves another whole video on its own. But memory is simply a reaction to the moment. So if I were to just test you right now and tell you, think about all of the biggest memories in your life. You're either going to think about the highest vibrational, the most exciting, the most full of love memories that you have, or you're going to think about the darkest, the most traumatic, the worst memories that you have. But I promise you, I guarantee you that all of your biggest memories in this lifetime are going to be the ones that you had the most reaction to. Therefore, when not reacting to the pain of the tattoo on the back of my neck, I did not create a conscious memory of it. And I mean, yes, I fell asleep, but I mean, I wasn't asleep for the whole thing. I was in a meditative state. And I didn't create a memory, right? And that unlocked a whole world of information as well. But I really do still love that tattoo. Okay, what's next? Okay, let's go over to my elbow tattoos. So ultimately, I never thought I was going to have an image on my body, right? So when I first saw, like literally when I was 17, 18, and I saw the flash forward of me in the future with all these tattoos, I thought to myself, oh wow, my body's a scripture, like my body's a book, because it just looked like words, right? Just words. And I thought that words were the information and that's it, which is kind of funny how I'm such an artist. And if you look at my art pieces, they're an explosion of color and the contrast of black and white. And so I've chosen never to put color on my body because the information that I'm putting on my body is just black and white. It just is what it is, right? It's in my opinion. And so I never thought I would have an image, right, on my body. And so, yeah. And so then me and my brother are years ago, I think we were maybe around 21, 22, maybe somewhere. My brother can correct you on that one. But maybe a little bit later, maybe 23, 24. Yeah, maybe around there. Anyway, and my brother's a year older than me. And so we really wanted a sibling tattoo. And so I channeled it. I'm like, let me channel one. This is great. And so the one that I channeled is the combination of the chakras that we both use the most. So we basically combined the third eye chakra, which is in the middle of the elbow, with the outer, which is the heart chakra. So we combined both of these chakras because he uses his heart chakra the most and I use my third eye chakra the most. So I have that on my elbow, and then he has that on his shoulder, and he put a bunch of color to it too. So it looks like a splatter of like watercolor. It looks really cool. And so that's really beautiful. And then it was probably, what was it? It was probably like a year or two ago. So 3 or 4 years later after that tattoo, when I decided to get something else on my other elbow. Of course, I want it to be symmetrical. And when I really channeled the energy of it, I channeled that it has to be the opposite of the chakra. It has to be opposite of vibration. The chakra tattoo represents pure energy. And what's the opposite of pure energy? Oh yeah, it's the atom. So then I got the atom mixed with the solar system, and you can see all the little planets around on my other elbow. So once again, the binary, you've got one, you've got the other, you've got energy, you've got atoms, right? So that's not like a super profound. I mean, I think it still is pretty cool. And it looks cool too. I like the elbow tattoos. So the very last tattoo that I have, or tattoos that I have, are on my feet. And these are very recent. I had a huge download in Panama. So me and my wife went to Panama and we went to tribal gathering. And when we were there, I had this huge realization. And it was really cool because it's directly linked to a shaman lifetime. So I was a male, I was a shaman in an indigenous tribe in a past lifetime, maybe in Panama, but maybe also just somewhere in South America. And yeah, and so as the shaman, I would administer ayahuasca and other plant medicines as like rituals and ceremonies and, and those kind of things for my people, for my tribe. And eventually in that lifetime, I started to recognize and realize that we don't need plant medicine in order to tap in to the infinite consciousness in the world, on the planet. And so then when I went to Panama and I went to tribal gathering and I didn't do plant medicine, but all of the shamans from all over the world were administering plant medicine to the people who were there. And I talked to a bunch of these people and was honestly slightly disappointed, which I shouldn't have been because that just means I had expectation. But I was disappointed in the consciousness level of the people who were doing all of these plant medicines. And they were telling me, yeah, last week I was in Costa Rica and I did peyote, and this week I'm in Panama and I'm doing ayahuasca, and next week I'm in Guatemala and I'm doing iboga. It was one after another, and I said, okay, so what have you done for yourself? What work are you doing? So anyway, so that's when, right when I came back from Panama, I think it was the week that we got back, I went into the tattoo shop and I said, I know exactly what I want and I want it on my feet. And once again, here's another image that I never thought I would have. And so on my right foot, I have the DMT chemical compound. And so that is, hey, DMT is the pure connection to source, and we can do that on our own. Right? And then I really believe that releasing DMT is so pure that it's also a form of unconditional love as a chemical compound, which I think is pretty cool. And then on the left foot, I have the chemical compound for cortisol, which is basically a stress hormone chemical that is released when we are in states of fear, right? And so once again, you've got love and you've got fear. You've got two of the opposites, and understanding that they do connect with our chemistry as well. And yes, there is one that I'm forgetting, which is the most apparent one because all of you have seen it a million times over. And you all know it very well, which is the one right in the middle of my chest. And it's the 3 triangles. And there's been some conspiracies out there about, these 3 triangles saying that they're like really kind of nefarious, symbols. And they're not. They're absolutely not. So this is another South American story. I was in Costa Rica and I ended up aligning and connecting to my soul tribe, my soul family, 2 beautiful beings, like 2 incredible beings. And they basically said, and at a certain point in time, I'll probably open myself up to doing this again. But they said, if you come to Costa Rica and teach us for a week, then we will give you food, we will give you housing. I think I paid for my own tickets there, but they provided everything else. And I said, let's do it. So I connected with them. We didn't even know each other before this. They never even had a session before this. It was mind-blowing, like just a crazy illuminating experience. And by the end of the week, they said to me, let's get a tattoo together. And so like, can you channel it? And so I took some time and I channeled it. And this is the symbol that came up. Now, originally, this is a symbol in Norse Viking, I believe, society. This is the only where it's been connected to is the Norse. But it's also, the symbol has been found all over the world and they don't know why. And so, so what I channeled about the 3 triangles, like the infinite loop of the 3 triangles, is that it represents, so each 3 points of the triangle represent the 3 different aspects of being human. You've got the body, you've got the soul, and then you've got source, right? Yeah, the body, the mind, and then source, which would be your soul. And so, yeah, and then there's three. There was three of us in this little triangle. There's 3 points on each triangle, and it's just this infinite loop of cycles and understanding that connection. And the three of us, me and these two other beautiful beings, have been on adventures, and we've been pretty much in many different places all over the world together, learning the balance of the three, and also studying and learning and teaching together. So yeah, so that was really profound. It wasn't until about a year ago, no, it was like literally 6 months ago, when someone reached out to me and said, hey, do you realize that the symbol on your chest, the triangle symbol, is actually a Galactic Federation and cosmic symbol that we see all the time? Because it was a channeler who reached out to me. And when I tuned into it, it was completely validated. And I've really always felt like that symbol right in the middle of my chest is a representation of a shield. Like, it really feels like it's a protection, it's a shield, it's this trinity that I feel all the time. And it's actually called the Volknut, if you guys want to look it up. And once again, you're going to see a lot of Viking stuff there. It really feels like it's this shield, this protector, this warrior type of energy. And I'm not surprised that it's also connected to the Galactic Federation. I didn't get too much information from them about the symbol, just that they use it quite often. And there's actually a group within the Galactic Federation that have that symbol of the 3 triangles right on their chest, on their uniforms, which is really cool. So yeah, I think that's it, guys. I mean, that was a lot. There's a lot of tattoos there. And I hope that you guys understand a little bit more about my tattoos, where I come from, my past lifetimes Akashic records, and the understanding that we are simply an accumulation of everything and everyone that we have been before right now in this present moment. You are far greater than just what you think that you are. And I'm excited for each and every one of you to understand and realize and wake up to who you are and the power that you hold within yourself. Thank you all so much for being here. Please hit the subscribe button. I know a lot of you watch but don't subscribe. And check out my YouTube membership page too if you are looking for more content. Love you all so much. Keep up the high vibes. Bye for now.